Ladies and gentlemen, what is happening? It is the craziest day of the year, going into the craziest week of the year, going into the craziest month of the year. It's football time, baby. All year long on this Friday show, we've gotten into deep cuts, tricks, tips, all that stuff. We've talked about who to draft a ton, nonstop, every position, everything going on. Today, I wanted to talk about how to draft. That's the last thing. People got their biggest drafts of the year. I'm sure a lot of sharp gamers in the chat have had a bunch of drafts already. But for anybody that hasn't done one or, ever or has one coming up this weekend, I just wanted to share some of my biggest tips. I've done a few this year, and honestly, a lot of times I forget some of these things. Some of these little things, not just about how to draft during the draft, how to build your roster, but things to prepare for your draft. So we're going to get into that. And also, if anyone has any questions at all on literally anything, today's the day, right? Because this is Labor Day weekend coming up. This is it. These are all, if you had your big hometown league drafts, they should all be scheduled for tonight, this weekend, next week. Especially with cut day on Tuesday this past week. Like you don't want to do your biggest drafts before that. So definitely, everybody, thanks for tuning in. If you're tuning in on Twitter, great. Helps us out if you go over to YouTube, though. Hit that like, hit that subscribe, throw a comment in the chat, whatever you can do to support us. That's awesome. If you really want to support us and support me and everything I do and all the help that we've offered, go and get yourself a copy of the Fantasy Alarm Draft Guide available now over on Fantasy Alarm. You can get the draft guide with all the write ups or just the cheat sheet with all the rankings, whatever you want to do. Help yourself, help us. All right. So without further ado, let's get into it. I want to hit you with some tips and tricks. The first one is before you even start the draft, a huge thing, and this is enormous for offline drafts, especially, is you want to have your cheat sheet. You want to have your rankings, whatever you're crossing your players off on and using as a guide, whether you're using Howard's grid from the cheat sheet, whether you're using my dynamic tier rankings, whether you're just using your own rankings in an Excel, have that and also have access to some form of ADP, either ADP or consensus rankings, because you also want to know what the casual gamers are doing. A lot of people in your league, believe it or not, aren't on Twitter. They're not on Reddit. They're not watching this show right now. They're not plugged in, right? They don't, they're honestly, they're casual gamers. They care about it for a couple weeks of the year to do their draft. And then they wake up and set their lineup on Sunday. They don't really do trades. They don't really care, right? You are plugged in. And what can happen sometimes is when you get a little too plugged in at times and you get, you see all these tweets about the hype players and the Dontavian Wicks of the world and all these guys, you can get disconnected from what the average person is doing. And what ends up happening is you end up overpaying for some of these players, right? Like in my rankings, I have Rashid Shaheed fairly high. If I were to just go to a live draft where it's just stickers and me and the board, I might overdraft that player, even knowing myself where these guys go. If I just have that set of rankings and I don't have access to ADP and another set of what the casual people are doing, then I might reach for that player. Now, luckily, when you do an online draft on Yahoo or ESPN or FFPC, where I like doing them, then you have access to their ADP and their rankings, and that's good enough. So you can just have your rankings and then that. If you're going to a live draft, I think it's a great idea to print out either ADP or like something like Fantasy Pros Consensus, so you know what the casual gamers are doing and you have a better idea of where you need to reach for players or not. I think that is very important. And it's not that hard to go check off your rankings, check off the ADP. Bang, bang. It's not that hard. All right. So that's the number one thing that I would say before going into your draft. Number one tip. Number two, I think for this show, we maybe we'll go the full hour, maybe we'll not. Depends, if anyone has questions or hanging out or whatever they're doing. But I got probably about 6 or 7 tips. Most of them are about actually drafting players. If you want my rankings, those are all up. I updated them all today in full for everything. If you want the linear rankings, updated. If you want the dynamic tier rankings, updated. You want yin and yang tight end, updated. I actually updated them while I was doing real drafts this week. Very serious drafts. Yesterday morning at 11 a.m., we did an 18-round draft with only Sirius XM hosts. So me, Howard Bender, Jeff Ratcliffe, Chris Meany, like all sorts. It was a very serious draft. So definitely go check that out. Joshua Lachaw with a question in the chat, which is a very appropriate one. beer to round ratio. Want to make sure I'm pacing myself appropriately. Got to be very careful with that, Josh, for sure. I mean, I definitely like to ramp it up as the draft goes down and I know who my late round targets are. Also, I will say a kickoff shot to start the draft is acceptable, but make sure you get your core lineup set before you start getting too banged up. And again, make sure you've done all your crossing out. That's the biggest thing. If you get too banged up, and I think a lot of people have been there. I mean, a buddy of mine, shout out my buddy Mark in the lag. We've been doing this league for like 20 something years. One year he tried to draft um, Deuce McAllister like 5 different times. So, definitely make sure you're staying on point with that. I mean, for me, if it's a very serious league, I won't even I'll have a couple beers during the draft and drink some beers afterwards, but yeah, be very careful with that. Gary O in the chat, what's up? Long time. Took Javonte Williams at the top of the 7th. Was that too early as my RB2 with Bijan Robinson as my 1? Uh, no, not at all. I mean, Howard Bender did literally exactly that just yesterday in the Sirius XM draft. Javonte Williams is one of the last of the few, um, kind of, in my opinion, bell cow type backs. I mean, Samaje Perine gone. Jaleel McLaughlin's a smaller player, so he's never really going to take over. Definitely not going to take over goal line. I'm going to get into it with tip 5, 6 here. I think it might be tip 6 on it. One, what you should do if Javonte Williams is your RB2, because we're going to get into those tips on the show, and he's a perfect example for that. But let me get into tip number 2 because I want to kind of go through as your draft goes. So you're set up, you got your rankings, everything going in the first couple rounds. Tip number 2 here: uh, take the best available players for your format in the first few rounds. All right. Don't ever sit down and say, I'm going zero RB today. Never sit down and say that before the draft. You can get up from your chair at the end of the draft and say something along the lines of, man, there were a ton of wide receiver values early on, and then there was a great tight end and a good QB there. So I kind of had to pivot to a zero RB. As you're getting up, don't ever sit down and say, I'm forcing myself into this strategy. It's one of the worst ways to bleed value. So go in and take the best available players early on and know your format too. Know if it's PPR, whether you should be going for those guys. Know if it's tight end. I mean, obviously know if it's super flex. You'd be surprised how many people don't really understand super flex. And then when all the quarterbacks are gone in round 4, they're like, wait a second, why is everyone drafting so many quarterbacks? And then it's kind of embarrassing for them. And you got to decide if, how to explain it to the person. Like, know your format, know what's going on. Tight end premium, know how early the tight ends go. Also, a huge underrated one I tweeted about the other day: know if you are in a 2 or 3 wide receiver league. If it's a 3 wide receiver league, you need to draft wide receivers earlier and you need to draft more of them. If it's a league with multiple flexes, 2 or 3 flexes, you need to, in most cases, draft a lot more wide receivers, right? And if it's a 2 wide receiver league, you can actually now unlock an additional strategy that's not utilized by many people, which is quote unquote hero wide receiver. If you only have to start 2 wide receivers, you can take one really good wide receiver, and then if you like some guys later, wait and kind of scrap at wide receiver, because you actually, if you have 3 good running backs or 4 good running backs, you really only have to start 2. So it's just like how hero RB creates a lot of leverage. You can do the same thing. So most of my leagues are 3 wide receiver, but definitely check your league. Know how shallow it is. If it's a 10-team league, you want to focus on upside. If it's an 8-team league, you only ever want to look at upside. If it's a 14-team league or a league with tons of flexes, now the Tyler Boyds of the world and those guys are guys you have to start drafting. So know your format and always start with best available and then kind of pivot. All right. So how are we hanging? 2 tips in. I think I got about 7 or so. I don't think we're going to go the full hour, but that was already 10 minutes. So I don't know. And again, for anyone just joining us late, thanks for tuning in. I'm going through some tips on how to draft, not necessarily who to take. We have the rankings up. I just wrote an article yesterday on my perfect draft, round by round, full PPR, 12 team, 3 wide receivers. Brees Hall first round, Devontae Adams second round, Josh Jacobs third round, like going through. Check that out. That's on fantasyalarm.com. That's free. And then if you like that, you can go check out the rankings and get set up there. Got another question in the chat before we get to tip number 3. Speaking of Pirine, with him being with KC now, how does that affect how you feel about Pacheco, full PPR? I don't think Pirine shows up and he's immediately Jerick McKinnon. I already had Pacheco kind of as my like mid area back. I mean, the reality is that if we truly thought Pacheco was like an every down type, full time guy, then he would be going in like the first round or second round because of how great that offense is. You got to factor in a couple things with some of these quarterbacks. Number one, Patrick Mahomes loves to call his own number, and he likes to do creative things. He likes to do, those little shovel passes and behind the back passes and, all sorts of weird stuff. Same thing with Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers calls more audibles within the first 3 yards of anybody. I mean, Brees Hall is still so good in PPR, but just keep that in mind that, they're going to do creative things. They're going to use Carson Steele. I'm sure there's going to be some Carson Steele BS at some point, right? There's all sorts of stuff going on. And I think, they grabbed P Ryan to use him. He will play a little bit. I know Kadarius Toney was supposed to play some running back, and then they cut him, so maybe that's what they're thinking there. But I'm not overly worried about it. Pacheco's still a very solid player. Uh, what's up, Jerry? How's it going, brother? Thanks for tuning in. Number three, this is a big one that you forget about until you're in drafts, and that's how to handle runs in the draft. How to handle the runs. What I mean by that, and I don't mean like, you had some bad nachos. Like I mean during the draft, a position will someone will take a quarterback, and then another quarterback will go, and then all of a sudden you see five quarterbacks go. Or the same thing happens all the time with tight ends, especially this year, because you see Laporta and Kelsey go, and then the moment someone takes one of McBride or Andrews or Kincaid, then they all start going. Okay. Here's how to handle runs at a certain position. And people will say zig when everyone else zags. That's not always the case. That is a very smart thing to do, but it's very simple for me how to handle it. If during a run of players, a player from that tier is available that you like, it is actually in your advantage to jump into the run and grab your guy. So for instance, we just talked about tight ends, right? You've got this group of you got this group of Kelsey, Laporta, Andrews, McBride, Kincaid, Ingram, and Pitts, right? Let's say your favorite of that group is Mark Andrews. And tight ends are sliding in your draft, and then someone takes Laporta, and then Kelsey, and then Kincaid, and then McBride goes. If Andrews is your favorite from that tier, that's the perfect time to jump in and grab Andrews, right? Now, if you like that tier and you hate the next tier, that's where you should zig and when everyone's zagging. If you like, so let's say you like all those guys and they all go. Pitts, Kittle, Ingram. So not Kittle, Pitts, Kittle, Ingram, everybody, right? All of them. The worst thing you can do at that point is take someone from the next tier that you don't like because you have to get a tight end and they're all going. Like if you have Jake Ferguson way past those guys, that's the worst time to take Jake Ferguson. Do not force yourself to draft a player, especially from the top of the next tier, because they're all going and you're worried you might miss out. The reality is, all those guys that drafted those players, they're not circling back for another tight end. Once 9, 10, 11 tight ends go, you might as well wait a little bit. Go yin and yang tight end, which is our strategy, our pairing system. There's a full article on that in the draft guide telling you exactly how to handle that, right? Same thing with quarterback. If you can get a guy you love from the tier, like I love when the quarterback run starts and I grab Kyler Murray. But if Kyler Murray and Anthony Richardson go, I'm not going to force myself to take somebody. That's where the zigging when everyone else zags comes in, right? If everyone's taking quarterbacks and they all go, all the ones that you want, boom, guess what? Everyone just picked all these quarterbacks. That's going to push down the running backs and the wide receivers and tight ends. That's where you make the move. All right. So that's how you handle the runs. Know your guys, know your tiers, and don't get the FOMOs. Never let the FOMOs force you into taking a player you don't want to take. So that's the biggest tip. That's a huge tip for me. That's tip number 3. So just to recap for people joining us, because I see people popping in. First off, thanks for joining us. Happy Friday. Draft weekend, baby. Labor Day weekend. Let's go. Let's go. This is what it's all about. And then we'll have football on Thursday. Ravens, Chiefs. Trey Bone. And then football on Friday, too, with the Packers and the Eagles. Ooh, baby. Ooh, baby. So, number 1, have a copy of your rankings and access to ADP. If it's online, great. You'll have that easily. If you're drafting offline, have a copy of those ADP. Tip number 2, we already went over these, but know your format. Know your goddamn format. Superflex, PPR, half PPR, tight end premium, guillotine, whatever it is. Like, know what your format is. Number 3, I just talked about how to handle runs. If you missed that part, just, rewind 5 minutes or whatever. All right, let's hit some questions real quick. Sam Fran, without the Trent Williams, yeah, the Jets could easily beat them. And Trent Williams is the best player on that offense. It hurts everyone if he doesn't play. They have to find a way to pay that player. Can you go over a couple of my favorite second round picks this year? One pick that I love in the second round. So for me, it's like the second and third round is kind of a glob, right? If you have to decide in the second and third round if you're a risk averse or if you like leaning into risk. That's up to you. It truly is. Because in the first round, everybody's awesome and it's all fun and games and high fives, right? I'm around St. Brown. He's got a good floor and a good ceiling. In the second round, you have a lot of guys with good floor and a lot of guys with good ceiling, but not there's only so many guys that have really good floors and good ceilings. A guy that other people don't like that I love, that I think has a good floor and a great ceiling is Devontae Adams, to be honest. Like, I'm taking him in the second round, I'm taking him in the third round, definitely. Like, this guy's averaged 10 targets a year over the last 6 years, 175 and 180 targets the last 2 years. He gets a quarterback upgrade in Gardner Minshew. Gardner Minshew threw 30% of his targets to Michael Pittman. Devontae Adams gets 30% of the targets there. He's going to continue to get peppered like crazy. He cares about his legacy. He wants the ball. Like, and he was still a wide receiver one last year, was he not? Even in a down year, right? 175 targets. I mean, Devontae Adams as safe as it gets. If you want upside, Marvin Harrison Jr., right? That's the ultimate high risk, high reward. Drake London, another one where it's like we haven't seen him with a good quarterback. He could easily just absolutely skyrocket. Last year, he led the league in contested catches with 17, catching absolutely garbage passes. Now he's going to get good passes. So he could blow up, Like, I have no problem. Like, there are only certain guys I'm steering away from based on format. Like, if it's full PPR, I'm not going to draft Derrick Henry. Just not going to do it based on the format. You know what I mean? So, and a running back that I honestly personally really like that other people don't love, Josh Jacobs. Dude. I wrote a full article on why Josh Jacobs should be going closer in ADP to Saquon and Jonathan Taylor. I don't know what people are scared of. AJ Dillon's done for the year. Marshawn Lloyd's a rookie that will mix in obviously a little bit. Josh Jacobs wasn't efficient last year, but neither was Saquon Barkley when he was on a terrible team. Saquon Barkley had a year with 3.7 yards per carry, right? And if you're worried about Marshawn Lloyd stealing touchdowns or whatever you're worried about him stealing, what about Jalen Hurts, who scored 15 rushing touchdowns? What about Anthony Richardson, who scored 4 in 4 games? Aren't you worried about those guys stealing some touchdowns? If you think the Packers are a good team, then you want to draft a starting running back for that team. He's going to fall ass backwards into touchdowns the way that Joe Mixon did last year. So Josh Jacobs, another one I love. Yeah, you can settle for Ingram. Are we supposed to call the players we drafted? Yeah, I mean, if you have their phone number, definitely hit them up. Evan Engram responds to one of my tweets once, but yeah, I don't really have a lot of players' phone numbers. Anthony Sherman, who I played with in high school, but he's retired now. Yeah, people reach all the time. It's crazy. Go Birds. All right, let's get back into another tip real quick, then we'll jump back in the chat. Tip number one, here's a bonus tip. Play on FFPC. If you are looking for an extra league, it's so hard to get people together last minute this time of year, friends or whatever. If you want to play for real, like if you have your own leagues and you want to prove that like you're a super mega star and that you're not just like anyone can win a hometown league. If you go to my FFPC and you win a league over there, the main event or the Fantasy Pros Championship or something like that, that is serious. That is like you can put that in your profile on Twitter and people respect that you're a FFPC champion. If you go over there, myffpc.com, use promo code Coop, they'll give you $25 when you deposit $35 or more. And they actually do drafts all the way through next Saturday. And you can set your lineups after all of them. It's crazy. I love the setup because they want people there live drafting for the Vegas drafts on Saturday. So you can actually watch the games Thursday and Friday and change your lineup. It's kind of wild, but definitely go get set up over there. So that's a little bonus tip for y'all. Tip 4 here, know your late round targets. This goes hand in hand with the draft best player available early on. Absolutely crucial to know the late round targets, know every strategy out there. So zero RB, I say don't like people think that that if you're not planning on going zero RB, you don't know how to do it or you shouldn't care about how to do it. No, you absolutely should know all the strategies. That way you can take best available players early and then pivot to those strategies if you need to. So I always go and look and see who are the zero RB targets. I write yin and yang tight end for people that miss the early tight ends and need to take two later on. Know the late round wide receivers, know the late round quarterbacks, Know all these players and keep them in your back pocket. And if you do that, and if you really like some of those late round guys, you can even reverse engineer your draft. Like, let's say you're so confident that one of Pat Fryermuth or Hunter Henry are going to be awesome this year. That's actually, if you're really, really into that, then that's great because it allows you to have that in your back pocket. If you get a good value on, Travis Kelsey or somebody, then great. But in your back pocket, it means you will never reach on a tight end because you have those guys in your back pocket. Spoiler alert, I kind of like those guys. That's why I use them as an example. But if you have that, then you can just draft best available and never reach on a position because okay, worst case scenario, I draft Pat Fryermuth, wait a couple of rounds, draft Hunter Henry. That's how I'm riding. That can really help you in the early rounds. Stay true to your best available players. Same goes for late quarterbacks. Same goes for late running backs, late wide receivers. Keep that in your back pocket. The more those players you have, the more fluid you can be early on. That's the trick, dude. That's the name of the game. And again, I'm answering questions in the chat. So if you want to know who those players are, throw them out there. Right? We got a chat right here. Is Greg Dulcich worth a flyer this year? I love Greg Dulcich, baby. Anybody that has the Fantasy Alarm draft guide in red, yin and yang tight end knows that Greg Dulcich has the number one condition for upside in fantasy football for tight end, bar none, has been be a top 2 target on the team. It's been the number one barrier to entry. That's it. Last year, it finally happened. I've been preaching this for years. Last year, it finally happened where every tight end that finished in the tight end one range, the top 12 tight ends in full PPR, they were all either the number one or number 2 target on their team. Told you so. We've been saying it for years that that's the best way to find upside. It finally happened. And that's how we get these guys. Over the last 7 years, every single year, a tight end has come from outside the top 17 in ADP to finish top 5. Last year was Sam Laporta. It's been Evan Engram twice, Mark Andrews, Dalton Schultz, Robert Tunyon. Like, they're out there. You need either 90 targets or 10 plus touchdowns. The best way to get there is being a top 2 target on the team. So Greg Dulcich, now that Jerry Judy's gone and Tim Patrick got released, Tim Patrick was his biggest competition for big slot. He's gone. It's literally Sutton is going to be number 1. And they were even talking about potentially trading him. There's now rumors that he was on the trade block, but he'll be there. But Sutton is one, and then who? Sean Payton seems to hate Marvin Mims. Josh Reynolds could not be more of just a guy, right? Like Michael Bandy, like Troy Franklin, a 4th-round rookie. Of course, it could be Greg Dulcich. So definitely keep an eye on him. Jerry wants to know why Brock Purdy's drafted before Prescott. I think a big part of that is because Prescott was operating kind of at his ceiling last year, where they led the league in scoring, and he was the QB3. And Purdy was operating kind of at his floor. If you go to Pro Football Focus, where they kind of take away all the obvious throwaways, the 49ers attempted the fewest passes of any team. The thing is, they probably won't need to pass like crazy again because the team should be awesome again. So I don't know. I do have Prescott over Purdy, but I understand why people would do that. But that's not how I have it, dude. Jose, dude, thanks for popping in from the cruise, man. That's dope. Hanging on a cruise, you know, get a little. What time is it over there? It doesn't even matter what time it is. You're on a cruise. It's like at the airport. Whatever time you're at the airport, it's okay to have a beer, no matter what time it is. Those are the rules. I don't even make the rules. But for me, no beers for me until I got show 6 to 8 Sirius XM. Me and John and Pemba tonight because Howard Bender's moving, and then I'm jumping on with Bob Harris at 8:30, and then maybe I'll have some beers after that. So until then, no beers for me. So have one for me. Have a margarita, Jose. Let's go. Let's do another tip, then we'll get back in. Tip number 5, roster construction is crucial, and you need to think about it during the draft, okay? You need to make sure that you're covered, okay? You need to make your bench is for helping out your team where it's weak. And this is the whole point of yin and yang tight end. If you start your draft with 2 running backs and then 3 wide receivers and then 2 more running backs and another wide receiver and then a quarterback and then a tight end, it's okay to use bench spots on quarterback and tight end to give yourself some upside. It's okay if your starting tight end is Dallas Goddard, that's great. That's fine. He's an okay, safe, quote unquote guy. But he needs an injury to either Devonta Smith or AJ Brown to have true difference making upside to be a top 2 target on the team, right? So if that's your starter, then what you want to do is use a bench spot on the highest risk, highest reward guy, right? That's the move. So know your roster construction and use your bench to help you where you're weak. And that brings me right into tip number 6 that goes hand in hand. Have some balance on your goddamn bench. I see so many benches that are filled with players that we like, right? Players that we like, but the construction, the balance on the bench is all wrong. And I'll explain what I mean by that. There are a lot of great handcuff running backs that could have upside. But if your entire bench is handcuff running backs, that's not doing anything for you. And the example that I where I see this mistake made the most is people that go zero RB. So what they do is they punt RB and they load up on wide receivers and they have a ton of wide receivers on the bench. But then they also need to have running backs on the bench. So let's say they have 5 running backs that they're drafting on the bench. They draft them and none of those running backs have any ability to actually start for them early on. So their bench is full of guys like Jordan Mason, who, yes, he has upside if CMC gets hurt, but can you actually start him in a lineup? The running backs are Jordan Mason and Jonathan Taylor and Nick Chubb, who aren't playing for 4 weeks, and and Tyler Algier and Marshawn Lloyd and Kamani Vidal, and they show me the bench and they say, "Hey, look, we love all these guys, right? We love them. We love Nick Chubb, we love Jonathan Taylor, and we love Vidal, and we love Marshawn Lloyd, and we love Jordan Mason." I say, "Yes, we do." And Jalen Wright and all these guys. I said, "We love all those guys. We do." But you kind of screwed up because who are you going to start week one? Who are you going to start for the first 4 weeks? If you're going to go zero RB, then you got to have a balance. You have to mix in a Antonio Gibson. Even if the upside isn't crazy, you need to have guys you can start, especially because guys are going to get hurt. That's the biggest problem. People think, "Oh yeah, I'll start Jonathan Taylor and Jonathan Brooks and Nick Chubb when they come back." Well, guess what? Some of your other guys could get hurt. If you draft a hero RB, like people drafted Nick Chubb as a hero RB last year, well, guess what? He got hurt. And you need to have Antonio Gibsons and Justice Hills and guys like that to help you survive. So make sure you have balance. Okay. Same thing with wide receivers. I see people come out and draft 9 wide receivers, and the bench wide receivers are like their bench. It's like Christian Kirk and Tyler Boyd and all these guys that are gonna play, but their upside isn't crazy. It's like you're not giving yourself enough access to upside. Go out and draft. Say you're in a 3 wide receiver league with a flex and then bench spots. Draft your 3 wide receivers and a flex, and then have maybe 1 wide receiver on the bench that you can trust for bye weeks and injuries. One guy that you're like, okay, I'm comfortable with this guy going in there. After that, go straight for upside. Who cares about floor? If you have 4 or 5 wide receivers that you can use, go for strict upside. Jamison Williams and Rashid Shaheed. Shoot the moon, baby. Go for upside. Like that's how you're gonna do it. So have those guys you can start. Like I like to have maybe 2 guys on the bench that can immediately go into my lineup, and the rest are going to be upside. That's how we roll, dude. That's how you got to do. That's how you have some balance on the bench. All right, let's check back in with the chat. See if we have any more questions. Coop, when do we start drafting Chase week 1 till playoff kickoff? I'm worried. I'm picking Jamar Chase at 6, right? 6 overall. I think the deal's going to get done. He's going to play. Like they're not going to be the only team that isn't going to pay their guy. Like he says he wants 1 penny more than Justin Jefferson, and guess what? He probably deserves it, but like they'll give him something in that range. I don't know, dude. He wants to be the best wide receiver. It's a sticking point for him. He's gonna play. He's gonna get the money. You know what I mean? So I'm picking him at 6. I love any one of CMC, Bijan, or Brees Hall, and you gotta love CeeDee Lamb, and you gotta love Tyreek Hill because he was on pace for 2,000 yards. And then I'll gladly take Jamar Chase. So if you are scared of him, then pick 5 is the best pick in my opinion. I like pick 6. I hate pick 7. I've been taking a lot of if it's full PPR, maybe Amon-Ra St. Brown. Half PPR, I actually take AJ Brown. Pick 7 is the worst pick. So if you get a chance to pick or have a competition to figure out what spots you're going to be, play hard enough to get a top 6 pick, or just don't pick 7. 7's crazy. Packers tight ends are any favorite? Nah. I mean, the thing is, I like Luke Musgrave. Tucker Craft obviously tore his pec. He's going to be like the second. He's going to be the blocking tight end. Musgrave's going to be the slot tight end. But I just like too many wide receivers there. How many wide receivers need to get hurt for Luke Musgrave to be a top 2 target on the team? We like Jaden Reed. We like Christian Watson. I like Romeo Dubs. I like Dontavian Wicks. I mean, you need like three guys to get hurt for them to be top two targets. I think it's just going to be inconsistent. I just like draft. If I'm going to draft anyone, I draft Jordan Love or I draft Christian Watson. Those are the guys I like over there. In a 10-team keeper league, $300 buy-in, pick 9 in a wraparound scenario. I have Puka and Kyron already. Besides being flexible, thoughts on wide receiver or RB wide receiver with a first round pick. Now the problem is I don't know who's being kept. I don't know who's being kept. But the best guy I see routinely sent back into drafts in these like leagues where you can keep 2 players is AJ Brown. I don't know why people don't like AJ Brown. He's had 1,500 yards in back-to-back years, and Jalen Hurts wanted to throw more. And there was a disagreement with Nick Sirianni, and this year Nick Sirianni apparently has been hands off. So Jalen Hurts and Kellen Moore are going to run this offense. Man, they're going to be slinging the ball. So AJ Brown, man, I love AJ Brown. That's my 7. That's the guy I take at 7. I'm going to say Brown. You got to take him in full PPR, but standard or half, I'm taking AJ Brown. So if he's there, then that's where I'm going. And again, beyond that, best player available. It really is the way to go, man. It really is. He's probably the best player available, something like that. But yeah, 14 team man draft. For that, I mean, I would just pull up my rankings over at fantasyalarm.com. If you're not set up, I do 2 different versions of the rankings over. I do my rankings for everything: PPR, half PPR, full PPR, the linear rankings that you're accustomed to. Okay. And then I also do a thing called dynamic tier rankings. And the dynamic tier rankings actually match up with the regular rankings. I do the dynamic tier ones first, and then I kind of set them into the order I would draft guys in. But that breaks things down even further into upside versus floor, right? So you'll have the top 24 wide receivers because every league has top 2 here. I'll even pull it up. I'll even give you guys a little sneak preview of what it looks like. Why not, right? Give me a second to pull this up. But you can actually see in there I balance upside and floor, and then I also go in and uh, I do color code who I like at ADP and who I don't, right? So with that one, you're getting the upside, the floor, who I like, who I don't. I will pull it up on the screen briefly right now to show you guys what I'm talking about. Talk amongst yourselves while I pull this up. No, I'm just kidding. We'll get it figured out. How do I pull in a PDF printable cheat sheet? Can I just share my screen? Okay. Well, I'll get it up here. Don't worry about that. Actually, you know what? I'll share Yin and Yang tight end. Dude, you guys are getting paywall content right now. How about that? Look at that. Look at you guys. Thanks for joining us today. Hit that like and subscribe. So in this article, you can get a look at what it looks like. It looks a lot cleaner in the draft guide. Stupid gifs in here, obviously. You got to keep the people entertained. This is a paywalled article, right? So obviously, there's going to be a lot of content in here. This is a long article with gifs, everything fun. This is my flagship article. But at the bottom, you get the yin and yang tight end rankings, and see how there you have the top guys are my standalone guys. If I get one of those, I'm not taking a second tight end. In here on the left column, you have the safe players. On the right column, you have the upside players. And green are guys I like at ADP. Green are guys I like ahead of ADP. Yellow, I like around ADP. Red, I'm not really drafting. So, and then of course the rest after that for 2 tight end leagues or tight end premium. I have these for every position. So if you get that draft guide now, then you get all that stuff, and that'll answer all your questions for 14 team leagues. And guess what? There's still a promo code active, promo code Cooper, Cooper, that you can use. All right. I'm not supposed to really be giving it out, but I give it out to friends and family. And I consider anyone hanging out, supporting us, watching the show, friends and family. You can use promo code Cooper to get 20% off any of our products. The cheat sheet, which just has the rankings, the draft guide, which is like only like 3 or 4 more bucks. It has all the articles and you get the cheat sheet. So that's probably the one to get. Or if you get a full membership, it's right now the membership's 40% off the year. If you use promo code Cooper, you get another 20% off. So don't tell Howard I gave it out. He's moving today. So we're sharing that, but that's available. So go check that out right now over at fantasyalarm.com. All right. All those rankings are in there. But yeah, I've already done a bunch of 14 team drafts, and they get pretty spicy, my guy. Uh, yes. New show with Theo. Yeah, if you want to, we're doing a new weekly show, Redraft in 5. Subscribe to that channel. But enough ad. We're doing too much talking about content and that stuff. Let's get back into some tips, and then we'll go back into some questions here in the chat. So we've already talked. Here are the tips so far. 6 tips. Have access to ADP. So have your rankings, but have ADP too. If you're doing an offline draft, print out ADP. You got to know what the simpletons are doing when you also do your stuff because you don't want to reach too far. Number 2, start with best available players. Please do yourself a favor. Don't fall victim to, oh, I have to go zero RB because all the cool guys are doing it. No, no, no. You can go zero RB if the draft takes you that way, but be flexible, be like water. Number 3 was how to handle runs. Don't get swept up in them unless there's a guy you would have taken anyway. If 5 tight ends go and the tight end that you like best is there, take them. Don't force yourself to take a tight end. Tip number 4, know all the late round targets. That's how you can know all the zero RB targets, all the yin and yang tight end targets, all that stuff. That's how you really truly dominate and use that to uh, kind of reverse engineer your draft if possible. Tip number 5, roster construction. Know what you're doing early on in the draft and know that your bench is to help you if you're at the positions where you're weak. If you wait on wide receivers, load up on the bench with wide receivers. If you wait on tight end, it's okay to have a tight end on the bench. Number 6 is bench balance. Okay. If you do zero RB and you load up on RBs on the bench, make sure you have the right balance. Make sure you have a couple guys that you can actually start. And then you have the upside plays. And then you have the Jonathan Brookses, who's not going to play for 4 weeks. And you have the Jalen Wrights, who might not do anything, but if one of Raheem Mostert or Devon Achane get hurt, now he's a star. Okay. So balance upside with usability, startability. Tip number 7 was, we haven't done tip number 7 yet. Tip number 7. Who's excited? Let's do questions and then we'll get to tip number 7. Do you need to draft 3 tight ends in an FFPC league? If you're doing the 20-round FFPC drafts, I encourage it. And I encourage it for 2 reasons. One is 20 rounds is a lot and you run out of RBs and wide receivers and people don't really respect the late round tight ends. In a regular 18 round draft, I took 3 tight ends because I waited on tight end. I took Brock Bowers, who was a high risk, high reward pick. This was a 18 team Sirius XM draft that we did yesterday morning that people have been talking about on the radio. So I took Brock Bowers, my first tight end. And because I thought Bowers is a little risky, I circled back and I took Hunter Henry and Greg Dulcich with later picks because Hunter Henry could be a top 2 target on his team. He could lead that team in targets, in fact. And I took Greg Dulcich because he could easily be a top 2 target with Tim Patrick gone and alongside Cortland Sutton. So that's something to do. The other one is that on FFPC, it's tight end premium. So those guys often end up being more valuable than the late round running backs and wide receivers because you get bonus points. That's why I love FFPC. That's why I reached out to Eric Bachman. I was like, we can have FFPC sponsor my show because I'm the tight end guy and it's tight end premium and I love tight end premium and I love playing on your site. Like I would never endorse some stuff I'm not doing, right? So FFPC, I love playing there because we get a huge advantage because we love tight end, right? And we know all the late round targets. And in those drafts, what I find is that the early tight ends are correctly steamed up and drafted early. I'll take them in that range. Then the mid-range tight ends are overdrafted. Your Goddards and your Schultzes and your Fergusons. Don't worry about those guys, but always circle back for more later because a lot of people still will just draft one tight end and stop drafting them because they're so accustomed to it from other formats and stuff. Huge advantage to be had with late round tight end on FFPC. If you want to play over there, again, use promo code go to my FFPC, use promo code Coop. They'll give you $25 when you deposit 35 or more. Really fun place to play. And again, that's how you put some respect on your name and some money in your pocket is win a main event over there because you get that's something. If I see that, if I'm arguing with somebody on Twitter and I click their profile and it says, 2-time FFPC champion league winner, I'm like, oh man, this guy does know how to play. So maybe I should listen to what they're saying. Right. Versus some egg account that's just, is like, oh, dude, the Giants are going to be so good this year. Like, there's a lot of different types of accounts on Twitter. Be one of the accounts that has some accountability. And winning an FFPC league and putting that in your profile is one way to do it. Yes, Jerry, Jordan Mason in the last round. Trey Bone. I love, I mean, with Elijah Mitchell done for the year and all the steam that's been coming out in Jordan Mason, I love that. So while Jerry's bringing up last round picks, let's talk about last round picks because that's my last tip here. Tip number 7, take advantage of your league's rules with your last pick. Take advantage. Whatever you can do, scrap. Like, this is poker, what we're playing here. In poker, there's a lot of luck. The cards are going to fall in a certain way, and you got to get lucky. But if you study the game and you know the rules, whether you're playing Texas Hold'em or whether you're playing Omaha or you're playing 5 card stud, know the goddamn rules and know the format and know the rules of the website you're playing on and take advantage of all that with your last round pick. If you have IR spots, draft Jonathan Brooks or Nick Chubb, move them into an IR spot, and then add somebody off waivers right away. It's a free player. It's a free player. My sister in a league, shout out Kate Cooper, she drafted both Jonathan Brooks and Nick Chubb in a shallow league, moved them both to the IR, and then added Jerome Ford and Chuba Hubbard. I mean, she's a Cooper after all. I mean, she wins our hometown leagues all the time. One year she won both our football league and our hockey year in the same league. So she knows what she's doing. So do that kind of stuff. If you have an IR spot, do that. Does your league force you to draft a kicker? Can you drop that kicker after the draft? Can you not draft a kicker at all? Right? If you can not draft a kicker, get a free look at somebody, right? Go out, draft somebody and wait and see who wins the starting job, like who gets a job. And then on Sunday morning or add a kicker. And some of these leagues let you drop players from your bench that have played and then add players that haven't played yet. Sleeper allows that. Yahoo allows that. Check the settings because you can turn it on or off, but a lot of my leagues allow for that. Here's what I'm doing. I drafted a team on August like 5th, right? And I took Mark Andrews. And it was very early for a draft. I don't recommend doing that, but I forget why we had to do it that early, but we did. So I drafted Mark Andrews. I took my kicker, I dropped my kicker to waivers, and then I added Isaiah Likely. And for the last month, I've had protection against a Mark Andrews injury. And Mark Andrews got into a car accident and he hasn't practiced in a while. And they're not telling us what's going on. So I actually did have to move Mark Andrews down one spot in my rankings. So if you're drafting this weekend, make sure you go and update everything. Re-download the cheat sheet, re-download everything. I updated all my rankings. I had to move him down because he hasn't practiced. So I moved him down one spot. We still love him. I still have him ahead of ADP, but we moved him down one spot. But I added Isaiah Likely. And here's what I'm going to do. The Chiefs and Ravens play on Thursday. I'm going to watch that game. And if Mark Andrews gets hurt or he is hurt, then I'm going to hold on to Isaiah Likely. If Mark Andrews goes out there and he plays great and he's Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely is just playing a part-time role, well, I'm going to drop Isaiah Likely and I'm going to pick up a kicker. Simple as that, right? Because I'm allowed to do that on that format. So these are little things you got to think about with that last roster spot. You're going to drop that player anyway. If you're a smart and savvy fantasy gamer, you are making moves week 1 because that is the time we get the most information. There will be the most change in your rankings week 1. When I measure other analysts, I don't really care about these like rankings challenges. Like, let's have a contest, see who can be the most conservative. I mean, some of my friends are really good at those contests, 100%. Shout out Tyler and the gang from JWB. Shout out Herms, like #1 defense ranker last year. That is an awesome skill and it's amazing. I don't mean to besmirch those contests, but my #1 thing is you come out, you have your draft rankings, your pre-draft rankings. How many adjustments are you making after week 1? How many of those adjustments are correct? How many of those moves prove to be league winning moves? Right? Were you adding Kyron Williams? Were you adding Puka Nacua? Were you adding Sam Laporta? Were you willing to move Sam Laporta up in the rankings? Though that is the mark of a true great analyst because anyone can spend 8 months putting together a set of rankings to draft. But are you plugged in? Are you making those changes? Will be. At Fantasy Alarm, you better believe it. I'm going to have an article every Tuesday with my rankings and with the yin and yang updates. So if you buy the draft guide now or the cheat sheet, just know that you don't have to be a member this year. I'm going to include the yin and yang rankings in my waiver wire article so that you can see what we're doing. So if you're, because I want people to be able to stick with the strategy. It's not just the strategy doesn't end with the draft. Zero RB doesn't end with the draft. It just is just beginning. You have to find a running back. Like the whole idea is to leverage the position and find somebody off waivers, find somebody via a trade, hit on the breakout. You still have a ton of work to do if you do zero RB. If you don't like doing waivers or trades, don't do zero RB and don't do yin and yang tight end because we still got a ton of work to do. So, so that's a big part of that. But take advantage of those things. Okay, there's two games this week to take advantage of if you can do those moves. Now, make sure you check your uh, before you do that, before you drop your kicker and do all that stuff. Make sure you check the rules to make sure you can add people, make sure that works. On ESPN, it doesn't work. On FFPC, I don't believe it works. It's like Sleeper, Yahoo, a couple sites you can do that. But there's two games. There's the Eagles game and the Packers in Brazil on Friday, and then there's the Thursday game with the Ravens and Chiefs. And there's a ton of opportunity there. Like in your shallow leagues, add Dontavian Wicks. Let's see what he looks like. Does he play a bunch? Does he get a partial role, a full-time role? What is it? Let's see him. If he doesn't do anything, drop him. You know what I mean? Like add Carson Steele. Let's see what Carson Steele can do. Let's see what Samaje Perine can do for the Chiefs. What is Justice Hill's role like, right? What if Derrick Henry gets hurt the first game of the year? Could happen happen. These are little moves that we can do to create a lot of leverage and crush. So just to recap, anybody that showed up late, here were the 7 tips we went through. Number 1, have access to ADP, especially for your offline drafts, okay? Online drafts, you'll have it right in front of you. Offline drafts, have your rankings here and have ADP or the consensus like Fantasy Pros rankings because that's basically ADP, right? Just have some sort of vanilla version, like consensus Fantasy Pros, the most vanilla rankings ever. Just have the most vanilla version of what people are doing so that you can see that and you'll know, okay, these are the guys I like. Here's where everyone else is probably going to draft them. And you know that where you need to reach or not, right? Because there's a big difference between correct rankings and correct draft, right? And here's a great example. Last year, Nico Collins finished as a wide receiver 12. If you ranked him as the wide receiver 12 in some sort of draft challenge contest, then that would have scored you a lot of draft challenge contest points, right? But if you drafted him that way, you wasted a ton of value because he was going off the board as a wide receiver 50. You didn't have to take him as a wide receiver 12. I would go as far as to say that if you draft him as a wide receiver 12 and he finished as a wide receiver 12, you actually made a bad draft pick. Yeah, it's crazy as that sounds. You did because you could have taken him 5 rounds later, comfortably 5 rounds later, or at least 2 or 3, right? If he's the wide receiver 50 and you rank him 12, you shouldn't be drafting him 12. You should be drafting him like 25. Okay. So that's the difference. And you got to keep track of that. Keep that in your mind. All right. So have ADP available. Tip number 2, best available player based on your format early on. Don't get too cute trying to go force, you know, zero RB. Don't force yin and yang tight end. Yin and yang tight end is my strategy. It's a backup plan. If you can get Travis Kelsey at a cheap price below ADP, obviously do that. Right. Like if you can get a stud tight end for a good price, that's always been the plan. Yin and yang tight end is a backup plan. Zero RB is a backup plan. Late round quarterback, wait on wide receiver. These are backup plans. And know how to handle the runs so you don't get caught up in that. That's tip number 3. Know how to handle these positional runs. If the QBs are flying off the board and you like one, take one in that group. If the QBs are flying off the board and you don't like them, do not force a quarterback pick. My goodness, that will ruin your draft. All right. So know how to handle those runs and know the late round targets. That's tip 4. Know all the late targets for zero RB. Know the late targets for yin and yang tight end. Keep them in your back pocket. Then you can be flexible. You don't need to force RBs early if you have the late RBs you like. Conversely, sometimes I go through and I look at these late round RBs that all the zero RB guys like, and I'm like, I don't like that guy. A lot of times I look at these mid to late RBs and I say, I don't like any of these dudes. So I'm actually going to draft RBs early. And, I'm going to lean into that. I like some wide receivers later. I like some tight ends later. Lean into that if that's the way you feel. Know the late round targets so that you can pivot to those strategies. Never sit down saying, I'm going zero RB today. That's wrong. But you can get up from your seat and say, hey, man, the wide receiver value, QB value, tight end value was there. I had to pivot to zero RB. That's how you be a draft master. That's how you be like water. Okay. Tip number 5, roster construction, right? This goes hand in hand with what we just talked about. Your bench is for fixing the weak spots in your lineup. Your bench is for fixing the weak spots in your lineup. It's not for just putting 100 wide receivers there. It's not for putting 100 running backs there, unless you're weak at wide receiver or weak at running back. I see too many people with best ball brain just drafting the first 8 of 9 picks they draft are wide receivers, and now they just have a bunch of good wide receivers on their bench. That's not the way to roll. Like, you have some sort of roster construction. And tip number 6 is about bench balance itself, right? Running backs, if you're going zero RB, you need to have a balance of running backs. You need to have guys you can start, right? You need to have guys that you can actually put into your lineup, and you also need to have the upside picks. You don't want just a bunch of boring, pass catching backs, just a ton of Antonio Gibson and Justice Hills, and you also can't just have only handcuffs and only like IR stashes because then you'll have no one to play. Balance, 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 balance. That's tip 6. Tip number 7, the last one here is know your format. Know your format for your last pick, for your rules, right? The league rules. Know if you have IR spots. Know if you can drop your kicker. Know if you can add players that have not played yet and drop players that have played and like to get extra looks on Thursday and Friday. Know that on FFPC, you can actually change your lineup week 1 after the Thursday and Friday games. I'm not kidding. The contest technically doesn't start till Sunday because they want to have drafts on Saturday. So if you go to myffpc.com, use promo code Coop, that's something that a lot of people don't know. That you get a free look. You can draft the Eagles defense and see how they do, and then either start them or add a different defense. That's a crazy tip. On Yahoo, in a lot of leagues, you can drop your kicker, stash a guy from Thursday or Friday, watch them play, drop them for a kicker, no harm, no foul. Or if they go off, keep them and drop somebody else for a kicker. So know these rules. Those are my top 7 rules for this year. And if you want my rankings, grab a copy of the Fantasy Alarm Draft Guide or the cheat sheet now. That is available right now, right this moment. So go get that, get set up. All right. I just rehashed those so I can clip it later. Let's before we go, I'll answer any last questions before we get out of here. So Michael wants to know, can I trust Brock Bowers as my only tight end on my roster 12 team? No. I love Brock Bowers. I think he's a super mega star. Maybe you after week 1 you can, you see him and he's awesome, but he could, like rookies do sometimes, he could start as a part-time guy. He could be behind Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers in targets. Maybe the Raiders are just terrible, right? Like, it's a little risky. I would have a second guy. For me, though, if I go Bowers, I'm not drafting another safe guy. I'm drafting a second guy. I'm drafting Frymuth, Hunter Henry, Greg Dulcich, Hayden Hurst, Juwan Johnson, anybody I think could be a top 2 target on their team. So there you go. Salsco, what's up, dude? Been a while since I've seen you. Thanks for popping in, man. Devin Singletary or Chuba Hubbard. Again, Carlo Barlow. Um, this boils down to the biggest question there, which is your current construction. To be honest, that's a huge one. If you go zero RB and you need guys to actually play, Devin Singletary, right? If you think Singletary might go in your flex or whatever, but if you started your draft with like Bijan in the first round and Josh Jacobs in the third round and Alvin Kamara in the fifth round, and then you also got like Brian Robinson Jr., then you probably don't necessarily need Devin Singletary, right? Like, maybe you go for the upside of Chuba Hubbard, winning that job and Jonathan Taylor not even playing this year, right? So you gotta figure out balance, right? If you draft Jonathan Taylor, definitely take Chuba Hubbard because then, sorry, if you draft Jonathan Brooks, definitely take Chuba Hubbard because then you can start him like the whole time. 10 team half PPR, 2 flex league, unsure of my position in the draft. How should I be strategizing this one? First time playing 2 flex. In 2 flex leagues, personally, I lean into more wide receivers because they're more trustworthy. Um, you can definitely start 3 running backs, but starting 4 running backs never usually pans out the way I feel like I want it to. So I just treat that like if there's 2 wide receiver spots, I treat it like a typical three wide receiver and one flex league. If there's three wide receiver spots and two flexes, now you can never have too many. Um, take Bowers and then take TJ Hawk later. I'm kind of off on TJ Hawkins. Not only is he coming off the injury, but they have Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and a massive QB downgrade from Kirk Cousins. I just worry about TJ Hawkinson. I'm not drafting a lot of Hawkinson, but if it all goes well, I could see him. If you think that TJ Hawkinson is a much better pass catcher than Jordan Addison, then do that because he's got to be the number two target ahead of Jordan Addison to have upside. Let me tell you, if Sam Darnold supports three pass catching players and also they have Aaron Jones, then Sam Darnold is going to be the league winner. It's so incredibly rare to have three guys all on the same team getting 100 targets. It almost never happens. So there you go. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Here's what I got going on this year. If you want info and stuff, we're doing a Tuesday waiver wire show. Okay. We're doing a Wednesday show where we're going to, and these are all on the YouTube channel. So Tuesday waiver wire, Wednesday show is going to be a lot of start sits and stuff like that. Friday on this show, I'm going to have a guest every week, and we're going to do FFPC lineups. And my guests already, a lot of great folks. Jim Coventry's coming on, Justin Boone's coming on, Matt Kelly, the Podfather himself. We're going to have on Kendall Valenzuela from Fantasy Life. We're having a ton of people on. It's going to be excellent. So definitely hang tight with that. And then for SiriusXM stuff, I'm doing every Thursday and Friday, 6 to 8 p.m. And then game day, I'm doing 10 to 11 on SiriusXM and then 11 to 12 right here on this channel answering every question. So we're going to make sure we're available for you. If you have any questions, they're going to get answered by us. That's free. If you want questions throughout the week, get a Fantasy Alarm membership in the Discord. We'll answer them there. If crunch time on Sunday morning, you got questions right here, this YouTube channel. I will be sitting right here answering every single question. All right. So thanks everybody for popping in. Big weekend here. Sorry to get all serious on you with tips and tricks, but I just want to make sure you guys crush, right? It's going to be all fun and games and giggling for the rest of the year, right? But this last show, I just want to make sure you guys have a good draft. All right. So thanks everyone for joining. Hit like and subscribe. Get a Fantasy Alarm cheat sheet. Crush your draft. Crush your friends. Crush your foes. Win that trophy. Win that money.